Christmas Eve found Noah Brooks and me standing on the shoulder of Highway 27, our breath turning white in the cold, our duffel bags heavy with everything we hadn't been allowed to keep at home. The road stretched empty in both directions, a ribbon of black ice and silence cutting through the snow-dusted plains. I remember thinking how cruel it was that the world could look so peaceful while we felt so completely unmoored. I'm Ethan Miller, 19 years old enough to know when you're not wanted and young enough to still believe there's a place where you might be. Noah was 18, his cheeks red from the wind, his optimism thinning with every passing car that didn't stop. We had left town before dawn, after another argument with his father and a quieter, more final silence from my mother. Christmas lights blinked behind us as we walked away, as if mocking the idea of home. Noah squeezed my hand, a small, stubborn gesture of faith. "Someone will stop," he said, not quite convincing himself. He always spoke as if hope could be summoned by saying it aloud. I loved him for that, even when it scared me. We had been together for nearly a year, mostly in borrowed spaces, empty parking lots, back rooms of friends' houses, the brief privacy of night drives. Loving Noah had taught me how to be careful, how to read a room before holding hands, how to turn affection into something quiet and survivable. But it had also taught me what it felt like to be chosen, even when the rest of the world refused us. Headlights finally appeared through the falling snow. A pickup truck slowed, tires crunching against ice, and pulled over ahead of us. The driver leaned across the seat and rolled down the window. He was broad-shouldered, his face lined by years of sun and wind, a cowboy hat pulled low over watchful eyes. "You'll need a ride?" he asked. His name was Jack Turner. He said it like it was a simple fact, the way men do when they've lived long enough to trust their own voice. He noticed our shivering, the bags at our feet, and nodded toward the truck bed. "It's not far to the next town. Weather's turning ugly." Noah climbed in first, gratitude written openly on his face. I hesitated for half a second longer than necessary, a habit I'd learned from too many false kindnesses, then followed. The cab smelled faintly of leather and coffee. Country music hummed low on the radio, a song about coming home for Christmas. Jack asked where we were headed. Noah answered quickly, naming a city farther south, a place we'd never been but had circled on a map like a promise. Jack listened without interrupting, his eyes fixed on the road. When he spoke again, it was to mention his wife, Linda, waiting back at the ranch, annoyed that he'd volunteered for a late-night supply run. He smiled when he said it, but the smile didn't last. As the miles passed, the conversation settled into something easy. Jack talked about the land, about working cattle through winters harsher than this. Noah leaned back, relaxing for the first time all day. I watched Jack instead, how his gaze flicked to the rearview mirror, how it lingered a moment too long when it caught mine. There was nothing overt in it, nothing I could name without sounding paranoid, yet it stirred a quiet unease. Snow thickened, softening the edges of the world. The truck became a small, moving refuge against the dark. Jack asked about school, about work, about what pushed two boys onto a frozen highway on Christmas Eve. Noah offered edited truths. I stayed quiet, measuring the space between what was said and what was felt. At one point, Jack turned the radio down. "Not everyone gets lucky," he said, more to himself than to us. "Not everyone gets to live honest." The words hung there, heavy and unfinished. Noah didn't seem to notice. I did. I felt the weight of them settle somewhere behind my ribs, alongside a growing sense that this ride, this kindness, carried a cost none of us had named yet. When Jack finally slowed the truck, pulling off onto a narrow turnout bordered by snow-laden trees, my heart kicked hard against my chest. He didn't explain right away. He just parked, engine idling, hands resting on the wheel. For a moment, all three of us sat in silence, the future narrowing to the space inside that cab. Whatever happened next, I knew, would follow us long after the snow melted. The engine continued to idle, a low, uneasy hum beneath the silence. Jack Turner stared through the windshield as if the snow-covered trees ahead held an answer he didn't want to hear. Noah Brooks shifted beside me, confused but still trusting, his knee brushing mine in the narrow seat. "Is something wrong?" Noah asked gently. Jack exhaled through his nose and finally turned toward us. Up close, I could see the strain in his face, the tension carved deep around his mouth. "Roads bad ahead," he said. "Storm's getting worse. Might not be safe to keep going." My stomach tightened. We had driven nearly an hour already. The idea of being left anywhere else but our destination felt unbearable. Is there a town close? I asked. Jack hesitated. That hesitation was the first real fracture, the moment when kindness began to thin into something unreliable. There's a motel a few miles back, he said slowly. But I can't take you all the way tonight. Noah frowned. You said. I know what I said, Jack interrupted, then softened his tone. Things change. He stepped out of the truck, boots crunching against ice. Cold rushed in as he opened the back door and reached for our bags, setting them on the snowy ground with deliberate care. I followed him out, the wind slicing through my jacket, dread pulling in my chest. Jack, I said quietly, we don't have anywhere else. He didn't look at me at first. When he did, his eyes searched my face with an intensity that made my breath catch. There was fear there, yes, but also something else. Want, conflict, a storm that had nothing to do with the weather. I shouldn't have stopped, he muttered. This isn't right. Behind me, Noah climbed out of the truck, confusion turning to alarm. You're just going to leave us here. His voice cracked despite his effort to stay calm. Jack rubbed a hand over his jaw. I'll call someone for you, he said, too quickly. State patrol, maybe. They'll come. We all knew it was a lie. There was no signal, no passing cars, only snow and the distant howl of wind through bare branches. Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills, pressing them into Noah's hand without meeting his eyes. I'm sorry, he said. I really am. Sorry wasn't enough. It wasn't warmth or safety or a place to sleep on Christmas Eve. Noah stood frozen, staring at the money as if it were proof that this was actually happening. I watched Jack instead, the way his hands shook slightly, the way he avoided looking at both of us at once. Then I noticed it, the glint of metal on the seat where he'd been sitting. A wedding ring. Jack saw my gaze drop. His face drained of color. He grabbed the ring quickly, curling his fingers around it as if it burned. For a moment, our eyes locked, and the truth passed between us without words. This wasn't just fear of the road. This was fear of himself. I can't, he said again, softer now. I can't do this. Without another word, he climbed back into the truck. The door slammed shut, final and loud against the quiet night. Headlights flared, blinding us for a second, then the truck pulled away, tires spinning briefly before gripping the road and disappearing into the snow. The sound of the engine faded, leaving a silence so complete it felt unreal. Noah dropped the money into the snow. He just left, he whispered, as if saying it louder might make it less true. I pulled him close, though my arms felt weak, unreliable. We'll figure something out, I said automatically, the words hollow even as they left my mouth. We dragged our bags closer to the trees to block some of the wind. Noah's optimism had collapsed inward, replaced by a stunned quiet that scared me more than panic would have. He leaned against me, shivering, his head resting on my shoulder. This always happens, he said after a while. People help until it gets complicated. I didn't answer, because I was thinking about Jack's eyes in that last moment, the regret tangled with relief, the desire he hadn't acted on and the choice he'd made to run from it. I realized then that we hadn't just been abandoned. We had been rejected for the sake of someone else's marriage, someone else's secrets. Snow continued to fall, soft and indifferent. As Noah's breathing evened out, exhaustion pulling him toward sleep, I stayed awake, staring down the empty road. Somewhere out there, Jack Turner was driving back to a warm house and a waiting wife, carrying his guilt with him. And I had the unsettling sense that his story with us wasn't over yet. I don't know how long we sat there after Jack Turner disappeared into the snow. Time stretched and thinned, measured only by the ache in my fingers and the weight of Noah Brooks leaning against me. Eventually, exhaustion won. Noah's breath slowed, his body slack with sleep born of shock rather than peace. That was when the headlights returned. At first, I thought I was imagining them, two pale beams cutting through the snowfall, hesitant, almost guilty in the way they approached. I stiffened, heart hammering, and gently shifted Noah so he wouldn't wake. The truck rolled to a stop a few yards away. The engine stayed on. Jack stepped out alone. He didn't call out. He just stood there for a moment, snow gathering on his shoulders, as if crossing the distance between us required more courage than he had expected. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. Is he asleep? I nodded. What do you want, Jack? He flinched at his name, as if it carried an accusation. I couldn't drive away, he said. Not knowing you were out here like this. You already did, I replied. Jack glanced at Noah, then back at me. I shouldn't have stopped again, he admitted. But I couldn't stop thinking about you. The honesty of it unsettled me more than a lie would have. You left us, I said. That's what matters. I know. He ran a hand through his hair, breath fogging in the cold. I panicked. I'm not proud of it. He gestured toward the truck. At least come warm up. Just for a minute. I'll take you both to that motel. I hesitated, torn between reason and the instinct to survive the night. I shook Noah gently until he stirred. Jack's back, I whispered. Noah blinked, confusion returning quickly to hurt. Why? Jack answered before I could. Because I was wrong to leave you. He avoided Noah's eyes as he spoke, focusing instead on the road, the trees, anything but the consequences of his words. We climbed back into the truck. Warm air rushed over us, shocking after the cold. Noah curled against the door, silent now, his trust fractured but not yet shattered. Jack drove, hands tight on the wheel. The silence felt different this time, charged, unstable. After a few miles, Jack pulled over again, this time near an abandoned rest stop. We need to talk, he said quietly. He looked at Noah. Just a few minutes. Noah laughed once, bitter and tired. Whatever you need to say it. Jack swallowed. I meant with Ethan. The request landed between us like a dropped plate. I felt Noah's body go rigid. Why? He asked. Jack didn't answer him. He looked at me instead, his gaze steady and unmistakable. Because I crossed a line the moment I let myself feel something I shouldn't. My chest tightened. You're married, I said, though it sounded more like a reminder than an argument. Yes, Jack replied, and I've been lonely for years. Lonely. The word carried weight, justification, danger. Noah shook his head slowly. So what, you leave us to protect your conscience, then come back because you want something. Jack's jaw clenched. I came back because I can't pretend this doesn't exist. I turned to Noah. Stay here, I said quietly. I'll be right outside. He stared at me, disbelief cutting through his exhaustion. Ethan, I won't be long. The cold hit harder when I stepped out, as if it resented the warmth I'd briefly escaped. Jack followed, closing the door behind us. For a moment, we stood in silence, snow falling thick and soundless. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Jack said. And I'm not asking you to choose me. I just need you to know this wasn't nothing. That makes it worse, I replied. Because now it means something. He took a step closer. I've spent my whole life doing what I'm supposed to. Tonight, for the first time, I felt seen. I should have stepped back. I should have thought of Noah waiting in the truck, of the fragile line between survival and betrayal. Instead, I stayed where I was. Jack reached out, stopping just short of touching me. Tell me to go, he said. And I will. I didn't. The space between us closed, slowly, almost reluctantly. When his lips brushed mine, it was brief, restrained, but it shattered something all the same. In that moment, I understood the full cost of what we were doing. This wasn't rescue. It was escape. Jack pulled away first, breathing hard. I can't, he said again, but this time it sounded like grief instead of fear. I can't ruin more lives. He stepped back, putting distance between us. I'll take you to the motel, he said firmly. That's all I can do. As we climbed back into the truck, I glanced at Noah. He watched me with quiet suspicion, reading my face too well. I looked away, knowing that whatever warmth we were driving toward, something between us had already begun to freeze. And the worst part was knowing the night wasn't finished with us yet. Morning arrived quietly, as if unwilling to intrude. Pale light filtered through the thin motel curtains, turning the room a dull gray. I woke first, the events of the night pressing down on me before I even opened my eyes. The heater rattled weakly in the corner. Noah Brooks lay on the other bed, facing the wall, his back rigid with a tension that hadn't eased with sleep. Jack Turner was gone. His absence felt deliberate, cleaner than goodbye. No note, no explanation, just the certainty that whatever courage had brought him back to us on the road had run out by dawn. I sat up slowly, the weight of what I'd done settling into my chest. The kiss replayed in my mind, not for its warmth, but for its consequence. It had been brief, almost chaste, yet it had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I had betrayed Noah without touching him again, and that truth felt heavier than any physical act. Noah stirred. He turned toward me, eyes already awake, already guarded. He left, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Silence stretched between us. Outside, a car door slammed somewhere in the parking lot, followed by laughter, someone else's Christmas morning beginning. Noah sat up, rubbing his face. Did something happen? He asked quietly. I could have lied. The opportunity hovered there, fragile and tempting. But the night had already taught me what silence costs. Yes, I said. Something did. Noah's breath caught. What kind of something? I told him. Not every detail, but enough. About Jack coming back alone. About the conversation in the cold. About the moment when I didn't tell him to go. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't defend myself. I let the truth stand bare between us. When I finished, Noah didn't speak right away. He stared at the floor, jaw tight, as if holding himself together required concentration. Finally, he laughed softly, without humor. So he gets to go home, he said, and I get this. That's not fair, I said, immediately regretting how empty it sounded. No, Noah agreed, it isn't. He stood and began packing his bag with sharp, efficient movements. I trusted you, he continued. Not because you were perfect, but because you were mine. I still am, I said, desperation creeping into my voice. Noah stopped and looked at me then. His eyes were bright but dry. You were, he said gently. But something changed on that road. The simplicity of it hurt most. There was no shouting, no accusations sharp enough to turn into anger. Just loss, clear and undeniable. What happens now? I asked. I'm leaving, Noah replied. I need to figure out who I am without always being the one holding us together. And me. He hesitated, just long enough to let hope flicker. Then he shook his head. I can't be with someone who chooses someone else when things get hard. He slung the bag over his shoulder and moved toward the door. I followed him, stopping a step behind. I love you, I said, because it was still true. Noah paused with his hand on the handle. I know, he said. That's why this hurts. The door closed softly behind him, final in a way no slammed door could ever be. I stood there long after his footsteps faded, surrounded by the quiet aftermath of choices made in the dark. I left the motel later that morning, walking instead of hitchhiking, needing the cold air to remind me where I was. Snow crunched beneath my boots as I followed the road away from town. Somewhere miles ahead, Jack Turner was likely sitting at his kitchen table, his wedding ring back on his finger, his life returned to its familiar shape. I wondered if he thought of us. If he thought of me. Years later, I still do, on long drives, on Christmas Eves when the world feels suspended between forgiveness and regret. I've learned that betrayal doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from fear, from wanting to be seen without being brave enough to face the cost. That night on the road taught me something I carry with me still. Love demands more than feeling. It demands choice. And not everyone chooses well the first time.